The King of Ethiopia, a work of remembrance and rebirth. Ras Nahom Einalim, Hidar, 2018, November 2025. Dedication. To all kings and queens of Ethiopia, to the people of KAZANCHIS, the children of Addis Ababa, and all Ethiopians true at heart, to all innocent victims of hatred, racism, gentrification, cultural erasures, civil wars, and genocides. Author's note: this book is both a personal memoir and a national vision, a record of what was lost and a testament to what still endures. It begins as the story of one neighborhood, KAZANCHIS, the heart of hearts of Addis Ababa, and unfolds into the larger chronicle of a people displaced yet unbroken. It speaks in the language of memory, not politics, of inheritance, not ideology. The first half, Chronicles of the Fallen City, tells of life, love, and legacy in a community that stood at the crossroads of Ethiopian history. The second half, Zemanayet Ethiopia, the Manifesto, reimagines what the nation could become, a land reborn from its ruins, guided by compassion, justice, and remembrance. It is my offering to Ethiopia, that she may remember her heart and find her light again. Ras Nahom Einalim. Part 1. Chronicles of the Fallen City. I was born in the heart of Addis Ababa, in KAZANCHIS, the heart of hearts, where every stone remembers and every name carries a century. I was born between Adwa and Omedla, between victory and return, between the roar of history and the silence of the present. I grew up in a home that was not just a house, but a country. In one compound, you could find colonels and students, artists and priests, philosophers and drunkards, a miniature Ethiopia breathing under one roof. That house stood for nearly a century, and it was torn down in a week. When the bulldozers bulldozed, I lost more than walls. I lost witnesses. But in the rubble, I found something greater, a voice that refused to die. This book is not an autobiography, neither is it a novel, nor merely a manifesto, but a resurrection. It is the memory of a city told through one bloodline, the conscience of a nation told through one heart. It is the journey from home to homelessness, from despair to destiny. It carries my family's story, from the noble line of Aksum, from the courage of Colonel Teferet Yitna, from the grace of Wasini Dempsey, and the embrace of Eyaya. But it belongs to everyone who has ever been displaced and still dared to love their country. I wrote it not to be read. I wrote it so Ethiopia could remember herself. And if in these pages you find your own reflection, then you too are a child of KAZANCHIS. Ras Nahom Einalim. The streets of KAZANCHIS. Addis Ababa. 1. The heart of hearts. In the era before the dividers of land came with their ink and iron, before the city was severed into districts and real estate zones, Addis Ababa was not a map. She was a living, breathing body. Her arteries were the avenues of her blessed soil, pulsing with the ancient rhythm of the earth herself. Her breath, the blue smoke of roasted coffee, rising like a morning sacrifice from the tin-roofed altars of 1,000 kitchens. And deep within this body, in the very hollow of its chest, lived KAZANCHIS, the heart of hearts, the pulse that never slept, the sanctuary where the past and the future met to speak in whispers.
When the Empress Tetu Betul, she of the discerning eye and the prophetic spirit, first set her gaze upon the valley that would become this great capital, she did not merely see the swaying eucalyptus or the rolling hills of Shiwa. She saw promise. She saw a kingdom rising from the mist. As the steam rose from the hot springs at Filwuha, circling like the smoke of an unseen altar, she turned to the Lion of Judah, Menelik II, and uttered the words that would become the foundation of our existence.
Here the earth is warm, a womb fit from not just a kingdom, but an empire.
That warmth never left. It remained through seasons of blood and seasons of honey. Even after palaces of stone rose and fell like breaths of a dying giant, even after the iron treads of tanks and the cruel blades of bulldozers scarred her skin, the ground of Addis Ababa continued to breathe. And from that very breath grew the heart within the heart, KAZANCHIS, the convergence of all Ethiopia's centuries, where the dust of the saint and the dust of the soldier are one. She was the pulse beat of a new world. Her soil mixed the noble blood of the highborn with the colonial dust of the interloper. Her skyline was a tapestry stitched together with the threads of contradiction, the minaret and the steeple, the palace and the tavern, the laughter of the wedding feast, and the lament of the funeral shroud. The Italians, when they invaded with their iron and arrogance, seeking to build a Rome in the highlands, erected ministries and mansions here. They sought to brand the land with their names, but they forgot that a name is but a shadow. When they were driven out by the fierce fire of our patriots, we transfigured their meanings and kept the stones they laid. We kept the names like Populari and Piazza, not as honors to the guests who stayed too long, but as memorials, as scars that learned to sing. When His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I returned in triumph, KAZANCHIS was already legend. Every street told two stories, one of invasion and one of endurance. The very air carried the pleasant scent of roasted coffee and the sharp tang of gunpowder. Churches rang their bells beside jazz clubs where the saxophone wailed like a spirit eternal. The Lion of Judah's diplomats, cloaked in dignity, brushed shoulders with poets, drivers, and dreamers. She was a republic of contradictions, and somehow in that divine chaos, she was made whole. In her very center stood a cluster of houses built during the emperor's reign, wooden frames that groaned with history, tin roofs that sang in the rain, and custom verandas where the old men sat to watch the world go by. Among them stood as a monument the House 647. It was known by everyone, whether they had crossed its threshold or merely felt the warmth of its shadow. It was more than a home. It was a meeting of eras, a bridge across the river of time. From its gate, one's eyes could wander across the sacred geography, the domes of St. Uriel, the spires of St. Estefanos, the high, silent walls of Menelik's palace at Taeka Negest, and the flags fluttering like the wings of birds above the Jubilee Palace. To live there was to live inside the nation's heartbeat. The Empress's prophecy still lingered in the steam rising from the earth.
Here the earth is warm, a womb fit for not just a kingdom, but an empire.
She must have known that more than a century later, even as the sky was pierced by cranes and the soil groaned under the weight of concrete, a child would be born in that same warmth. A boy who would carry her city's soul inside him long after the grand palaces were turned into parks, long after the streets were renamed by men who knew not their history, long after her people were scattered like leaves in a whirlwind. Every dawn the air quivered with the metallic click of buckets on stone. Women in patterned shawls, their movements as graceful as the flight of swallows, fetched water, their laughter skipping between them like birds. The smell of buna mingled with diesel, with frankincense, and with the faint, cool perfume of eucalyptus that drifted down from Entoto's slopes. Radios hummed news from distant wars, of empires clashing and borders shifting. But for the children of the sun, the real world began and ended in the narrow, winding lanes of KAZANCHIS. Nahom remembered those mornings as music. The clatter of the iron and tin gates was the percussion. The cries of the Quarali and the Liwash were the melody. He heard the Azuwari merchants calling out, Mewolbia, Metregia, like prophets in the wilderness. And above it all, the chant of church bells rose, blending with the muezzin's call to prayer from the mosque by the main road next to Babylon. Many songs, one city, one heartbeat. 647 stood at the center of it all, proud but humble. Its walls cracked by the years, yet shining white after every rain. On the veranda grew a vine of jasmine that bloomed even in the cruelest drought, and in front of it stood 2 green apple trees, planted by the colonel himself when the house was young and the world was full of light.
I was born in KAZANCHIS, where stone remembers fire, still warm with the march of ancient empires. Between Adwa's thunder and Omedla's true way, I was born in KAZANCHIS, where blood is memory, and memory stays.
Inside the walls of 647, light filtered through lace curtains embroidered by Wasin, who ruled the household, the neighborhood, and the world with a quiet grace and a wooden spoon. She was the anchor in the storm, the silent prayer that kept the roof from falling. In the mornings, Ayaya, her first daughter, presided over the kitchen, guardian, cook, and keeper of order. Her hands moved like a conductor's, orchestrating a symphony of scent. Onions sizzling in oil, berbere blooming red, coffee beans crackling in a clay pan. "Smell is memory," she used to say, "and we must feed both stomach and soul." She was the one who raised the children, ensuring that no one left the table hungry or unblessed. The colonel would emerge from his room in pressed khaki trousers, his mustache trimmed with military precision, a remnant of a time when honor was the only currency. He had served in Harar, in Asmara, in Jigjiga, cities that still whispered his name in the corridors of power. His voice carried authority even when he laughed, and the children would straighten their backs when he spoke, for he carried the weight of the mountains in his chest. On the wall above his desk hung a framed photograph of Emperor Haile Selassie I, eyes stern yet kind, watching over the room. Below it lay a small brass box containing medals, campaign ribbons, and a folded letter from an old comrade lost in the north, a letter that smelled of old dust and unforgotten loyalty. Wasin called him my lion, though he was as gentle as the evening breeze at home. Their house breathed with
them. It was large and old, built by Fidawari Desalen for his daughter as a wedding gift. It had a spacious veranda, yards that stretched front and back, and a chimney that smoked through seasons carrying prayers to the sky. There were separate rooms in the compound, and trees of all kinds: fig, timber, olive, lemon, eucalyptus, apple, and peach. The Fidawari had built his houses himself, stone by stone, after returning from service, refusing the government quarters offered to him. "A man should sleep under the roof his own hands have raised," he had said, and that roof, patched and mended through the decades, would later shelter 3 generations
and half the neighborhood during the famines of the 1980s. When the darkness of the Derg fell upon the land, stripping and dispossessing Ethiopians of their honor and belonging, the house was taken from the family and fenced. It housed a high-ranking official of the regime, then the owners of the He Hotel, and others after them, who knew not the secret language of its walls. Then came Teferadigan and sanctified it with his love, and it henceforth became known as the Colonel's house. Yet it was never his alone. It belonged to the wanderer and the wayfarer. It was a sanctuary for family, friends, strangers, and lost souls who found their way to Addis and stayed because the home welcomed them. To cross its gate was to step into a miniature Ethiopia. There the air was thick with the exchange of ideas. Priests debated the nature of the divine with poets who saw God in the dirt. Police officers shared tej with painters who captured the light of the hills. Students quoted Marx to veterans who quoted the Psalms back at them with the force of a hammer. It was the kind of home where every evening felt like a session of Parliament, and every meal felt like a holy communion. Outside the gates, life thrived in a riot of color and sound. There were bars where the old Osmaries sang verses that cut deeper than any sermon, hair salons where the politics of the nation were whispered over the heat of the dryer, and small shops that sold everything from rusty nails to the soft silk of nostalgia. At dusk, music poured from the clubs like wine from a jar, the sounds of Mulatu Astatki's vibraphone, the soaring voice of Alamayehu Eshetie, the souls of Malukan Malese, Gedeon Daniel, Adane Teka, Tutu Yena Duduye, Bezawork Asfa, Ayob Makonnen, Tigist Afawork, and such. And because KAZANCHIS was a portal to the world, the voices of Alpha Blondy, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Cher, Bob Marley, and Amy Winehouse mingled with the local hymns. Nuwe Debebe's lyrics turned heartbreak into a rhythm that everyone could dance to. Lovers strolled under flickering streetlights, and the scent of wet earth rose when the city cooled, a scent that promised renewal. KAZANCHIS was not always rich in gold, but ever abundant in spirit, abundant in story, in solidarity, in stubborn joy. Every wall carried the fingerprints of survival. When heavy rains flooded the alleys, the people waded through the water together, arm in arm. When weddings and funerals came and went like the seasons, the whole neighborhood feasted in oneness. When one home roasted coffee, the whole lane drank it through the scent alone. "We are one smoke," they said, a philosophy of the hearth that no politician could ever dismantle. In those years, before the word development became a threat and a shadow, Addis Ababa was a promise. And the children of 647 grew up believing that promise, that knowledge could lift a family, that love could mend a country, and that faith was stronger than fear. Nahum's world was small but sufficient, an entire universe contained within a few dusty blocks. When the city slept, KAZANCHIS never did. Her lights blinked like stars that had fallen to earth to see what the humans were doing. He would climb to the roof and listen to her breathing, the low sigh of taxis, the lullaby of distant dogs, the soft electric hum of power lines. He heard the sweet laughter of the prostitutes that crackled in the dark corners, the sweat dripping from the old roofs of bars that danced until the sun rose, the lovers kissing in the shadows, the drunkards fighting for a dignity they had lost, the smokers lighting their dreams, and the parents whispering under bedsheets, hoping not to wake their offspring. He heard the people gasping for air in rental beds, satisfied that they were, for then, at home. He did not yet know that this rhythm, this perfect, chaotic pulse, would one day be silenced.
I was born in KAZANCHIS, where the jasmines scent the air, where the colonel's silent medals looked like they knelt for prayer. Between Adwa's thunder and Omedla's quiet flare, I was born in KAZANCHIS, and I found my spirit there. I was born in KAZANCHIS, and raised in 647, where the kitchen smoke rose like a pathway up to heaven, where love was the doctrine, where honor learned its name. I was born in KAZANCHIS, and my heart is leavened by her flame.
The city still dreamed then, and her dreams lived in KAZANCHIS, the heart of hearts, where Nahom was born. In Casablanca, a place that still carried the echo of empire and the scent of resistance. In KAZANCHIS, where streets were named for victories that saved continents, for wounds that never quite healed, for saints who walked the earth, and for martyrs who watered our soil with their blood. She was a neighborhood whose
Earth had swallowed both invaders and kings, yet still bloomed with the wild music of the tavern and the somber prayer of the monk. KAZANCHIS, the paradox. Founded by emperors, built by fascists, sanctified by patriots, and redeemed by the memory of her children. Her old Italian facades leaned against Ethiopian monasteries in a weary embrace. Her cafes hummed with the sophisticated notes of jazz and blues beside churches older than the city herself. Every corner bore witness of cruelty and grace, of what it cost to remain free in a world that wants to bind you. And in that living archive, a child opened his eyes, surrounded by the ghosts of heroes and the laughter of his people. He breathed air heavy with the weight of history and light with the hope of the morning. He would one day be called Ras Nahom. But first, he was simply a son of KAZANCHIS, heir to every song the streets ever sung.
I was born in the heart of Addis,
He would later write in the chronicles of his exile.
in KAZANCHIS, whose very name still echoes the Italian word KAZANCHIS, the houses of the state, built when Mussolini's dream of empire bled into the soil of Africa. The fascists invaded to avenge their humiliation at Adwa, to raise the Roman banner over the peaks of Ethiopia. They built roads that led to nowhere, bridges that spanned the abyss, and ministries of iron, and they spilled oceans of blood to do it. They slaughtered more than 500,000 Ethiopians. When His Majesty Haile Selassie I returned and reclaimed the ancient throne, he found a land wounded but unbowed. The buildings remained, but the spirit that inhabited them was entirely Ethiopian. We kept the names of those places not out of reverence for the men who built them, but as testimony, to remember the price of our freedom and the hollow cruelty of wanting what is not yours.
He was born in the heart of KAZANCHIS, in the heart of hearts. In Aznaketch's house, situated between two symbols of eternal triumph, the Adwa Hotel, named for the battle that shattered the myth of European invincibility, and the Omedla Hotel,
named for the village where the emperor raised the green, yellow, and red flag again upon his return. Between them stood their house, small, old, and vibrating with memory. Across the street stretched the long brick building called Babylon, its bars, cafes, and bakeries still humming with stories of centuries. All around, the ministries rose like stone sentinels: agriculture, labor, foreign affairs, built by invaders, reclaimed by kings, and inherited by the children of the sun. Casablanca was a neighborhood of deep breath and even deeper roots. The golden dome of St. Uriel, the solemn, the holy stones of St. Estefanos, the echo of bells from Gebi Gabriel and Taika Negest, where the tired royals lie in their eternal sleep, all these surrounded them. And they had the first mosque of Addis Ababa, built by Indian architects and craftsmen led by Mohammed Wali, standing as a testament to the diversity of the spirit. There, everything sacred and political and human was intertwined like the roots of an ancient tree. They were geographically, spiritually, and historically the heart of Addis Ababa. When Ras Nahom was born, KAZANCHIS was truly alive. She was a place where the morning smelled of roasted barley and the sweet smoke of incense, where children learned to pray and to curse in the same breath, and where the rhythm of life was a duet between the silence of faith and the noise of the world. The sun fell gently over her tin roofs and her tall, whispering trees. From one window drifted the ancient, ethereal voice of Saint Yared. From another, the raucous laughter of a family sharing their first coffee. Men in worn suits, their pockets empty but their briefcases full of hope, hurried to their tasks. Women, draped in the white light of their netelas, moved like angels between the houses. There was always music, spiritual hymns, the longing of Tizita, the rhythmic fire of Eskista, and the static of the radio mixing with the chants of old wars. KAZANCHIS was a chaos arranged by love, and in the home at her heart, the house of the Colonel and Wasini, that love was tangible. It was something you could touch, drink, eat, and share until you were full. Wisdom and honor served as appetizers and desserts. If you came in the morning, you would hear saints singing through the mouths of the elderly. In the afternoon, you would find the most diverse collection of people arguing the most diverse kinds of arguments. If you stayed long enough, you would hear the stories of Adwa and Mechu, of the resistance in the mountains and the royal parades in the streets, of the times when the mere mention of Ethiopia's name could silence a room in the capitals of the West. In that house, love was the only law. Even the fiercest quarrels ended in the shared laughter of the table. And from that laughter grew Ras Nahom, the boy who would one day write the story of